nice to see you all. Let's give this a go. The value of design, in particular for design leaders, is a topic I'd like to cover with you today. A little bit of background to me. Yep, as you can hear, I'm James Hall, and I work currently today within the world of Park. It is a consultancy at this part, the intersection between design meets business and business meets design. And the good news is, I absolutely love it. It gets me out of bed every day on a Monday morning because I get the chance to go and work with people like yourselves, different organizations around the world who actually want to improve this, to make it better, to ultimately bring value to maybe their customers, their consumers, and let's say end users, also to the actual organization as well, whether it's for profit or a non-profit situation. And I've been lucky enough to be doing this over the last 25 years, in relation to the company I work for now, Park, for the last 10 years, and ultimately I'm now the business owner, and I have that honor to actually take the company forward for the next 25 years, hopefully, on that side. It does mean I get to work with clients like this. It makes me really humble to go into business environments like this and actually work with fellow professionals like yourself and have a chance to actually spar and see how can we improve the value of design, how can we communicate it, and how can we get design leaders in particular, depending where they are in their actual career, to actually lift their capabilities and competencies to actually talk the language of business and vice versa. But for me, it didn't always start there. I am actually a humble designer from back in the late 90s. I'm now showing my age as I say this. And my first role took me to this brand here, Lego, as in a toy company. I meant to do medical products because I wanted to have a sense of purpose. And I'm going to come back to that sense of purpose because design leaders need a really good sense of purpose to be convincing enough if they're going to actually be able to communicate the value of design. My world started here as a designer, and my purpose back then was to help kids, parents, and adults actually have fun when they learn and actually enjoy life and elevate themselves as they go through their different learning stages and areas of development. And it's allowed me to actually, I was quite lucky enough at that point when I joined as a junior designer that actually design in this company was valued already at that point. Now, you're talking 1998, 1999. That's how long ago it was. So I didn't have this challenge as I progressed through from a designer through to, let's say, a manager and ultimately a director heading up early innovation in this environment, that I had to prove the value of design. Yet we still did it in that environment. Roll on to today, 25 years later. I'm now at Park, and I'm now not in a corporate environment. I'm now actually working across different industry sectors, tourism, finance, automotive, FMCG, fast market consumer goods. And of course, that sense of purpose has to come back into play, because when I was at the days of Lego, design was valued, and on top of that, it wasn't seen at its lowest maturity level of simply there to make things look nice or look pretty. The value creation was much more mature in the sense of process, and it was always up to a strategic level. When I stepped out of that world and came to the consultancy world for the last 10 years, all of a sudden, there was a sharp reality. Not everybody's like Lego. And of course, that value creation is a lot harder to prove where the maturity level of design is maybe at its lowest or even none at all on that side. Ultimately, I enjoy doing this, where you try to reimagine, help organizations reimagine anything from healthcare systems to shaping, let's say, climate-positive outcomes on that side, driving innovation, pushing for growth, and ultimately social change. Today, I hope to cover these points and actually take you on a little but very soundbite journey on what and how the value of design for design leaders is super important, and give you maybe some working tools or, let's say, models that might inspire you to walk out of today and take away for the rest of this week, and maybe even try out in your day-to-day working environment. I have 3 case studies I'd like to share with you from our background. I'm going to go back to my humble beginnings of Lego and tell you where they've gone from there to where they are today, because they're still one of my clients. I'll work with another totally different industry, Airbus, and also Halion, which is FMCG. Hopefully, I'll be able to cover them all. Let's see. I might have to skip a few things if I end up talking a little bit too slow or on topics that maybe are relevant to you on that side. Ultimately, I'm going to end with this whole topic on the consequences of the design for design leaders, and leave you with a little model in the relation to business intelligence, emotional intelligence, and creative intelligence that design leaders need to master, and those combinations in helping with the implementation of this. So let's get into the subject of the value of design for design leaders. How many of you are design leaders in here? Hands up. Ooh, we've got a couple. Who are more managers of design? Okay, even less. That's it. Who are designers? Ooh, good old thing. Great. So this is going to be really insightful for the vast majority of here, because that progress of where we focus at Park from that intersection is you as a designer leading through maybe to a lead designer, to a senior designer, to a design manager, and maybe even then ultimately leading on that part. So you're going to get an insight into this world. So why is this relevant as a topic for us to go forward with today? Well, I'm going to give you 6 high-level rationales on that side. Very simply put, first one is a classic one, the economic and organizational pressure. I've been a part of the journey for the last 25 years, advocating, championing, to say design value is great for you and your organization because you can improve end-user experiences. You can make people feel better in what they do, make their life simpler. Well, the good news is, as we've done that championing, and of course, maybe those executive teams, those management teams have stood up and listened, they've made the choice to invest in design over the last 10 years, means that pressure is you have to deliver to that. So clearer returns on investment. Later on, I'm going to talk about return on investment. Earlier on Tuesday, one of the workshop was to give a tool and a method to say, hey, next time you do any design initiative or activity in design where you have to justify money, resources, time to do it because you believe in it, you should do an ROI calculation on that at the beginning of the project, during the project, and ultimately at the end of the project to see if it delivered. Growing maturity and accountability then naturally comes with this. And, of course, the increasing complexity across systems and products. As design becomes more mature, that, of course, it has diversified. Here's a fact. I did a bit of research earlier this year for one of our clients. When I graduated from university out of the UK, it was round about 1998, and there was about 7 or 8 different disciplines of design you could study, have a degree in, and get a job title in. I thought it was exciting. Today, there are 78 different disciplines of design you can study, have a degree in, and ultimately have a job title in. And that means in organizations, from a management point of view, from a leadership point of view, they need to know what to do with that, and they expect the value to be delivered on it as well. And that talks to that, some of that complexity. We have diversified, we have specialized as an industry, and of course, as you become more holistic, 360, talk about experiences, work with more social problems or humanitarian problems, those different disciplines of design have to be all interconnected to deliver their value. Additionally, I won't be going heavily into AI, but I'm excited by this subject. Love the presentations and stories being told this morning. I think this is disrupting my world right now in a super, super positive way, and it's making things faster, different, and it's really shaking it up. But it is reshaping how value is created, and that means we also then need to rethink some of the tools and methodologies that we deploy in the next 5 to 10 years as this happens, and we need to keep up with it as well. Rising social expectations. Yeah, absolutely. This sense of purpose is a huge topic on this side, and making sure that that value is created actually delivers in the end, because otherwise it can be quite damaging. So, what can be created in the sense of this different value creation on this side? Well, it can be done in many different ways, and there's a couple of points highlighted on this screen behind me, of course. In particular, of course, we can work from an economical point of view, profit or loss. We can look at customer, consumers, and users' point of view, and we can look at the slightly bigger topic of environmental or social situations that you want to work with. All of these can deliver value from a design perspective. Now, of course, what I'm intrigued behind these points, of course, is the fact that design is really good at being a connector with all of these. It has the ability to go across disciplines, to go across different functions of the business, and see things that people can't normally see in businesses and organizations. And that's something that we need to bring to the forefront. Now, if we are in the area of believing and trusting, of course, that design can add value to people, to an organization, to society, or even at a humanity level point of view, it means we need to be able to justify it. And this simple equation on the screen always excites me, but also probably puts fear into most design people and design managers and design leaders. It's a very simple equation. When you're working with design, whether operationally, whether tactically, or at a strategic level in an organization, this has to be thought about every time you're doing design work and getting the value out of design work, where the costs of design, of doing that work, should absolutely be significantly less than the economical value through design that you create. Now, simple equation. In reality, it's actually quite tough to do. But hopefully, maybe I'll be able to give you some insight to that later on. Now, this isn't a new problem as we've matured design. I'll rewind a good 50 years, just over 50 years. You might recognize this gentleman, Thomas Watson Jr., CEO of IBM. He actually said at the beginning of there, good design is good business. And of course, that value creation was already there from an organizational point at the top of their game. Now, what's interesting is, certainly from Park's perspective and my perspective, we've done a lot of following of this topic of understanding that value creation, whether from profit, whether from loss, whether from improving situations from being efficient or inefficient, whether you're looking to build intangible assets, patents, IP, etc. All of these value creations are really interesting to follow. Now, good news in the last sort of 10 or 12 years, there's some pretty awesome publications out there. You maybe recognize some of these images for those who study them. If you're not sure what they are, come back to me at the end. I've got a whole list I could share with you that are worth reading. They take a while, by the way. But design councils, institutions, companies themselves, and of course consultancies have been publishing these and documenting these case studies for you to follow. And they carry out all of this information that's really insightful for us to work with. Now, you might say then, great, people really believe in the fact of the value of design. And the reality in the companies that we go into and work with, that's actually far from sometimes the truth, especially in the organizations where design maturity is at its lowest level or not at all. And that means persuasion is needed, and regular persuasion that is needed. Let's say to your stakeholders or to the different groups or your partners, whether being internal or external. So we've got the studies, we've got some of the proof. We need to work with it from a design leadership point of view and then advocate it. Now, those documents there that we've studied over the last 10 years, and many of them, kind of have some similar stories and headlines here on the left on your screen. Ultimately, well-led design definitely, absolutely has proven to boost business performance, and there's lots of interesting insights behind it. And, of course, the investments in design correlates usually to a stronger design leadership topic. So let's break down a little bit on the how here on this side. If we know there's proof out there, and there are case studies showing that, of course, design is valued in some way, how do we then, of course, maybe for yourselves apply that in your daily practice? Certainly from my side, it's been a great topic to work with, and I've had lots of magical moments where I've had to proof this out and actually do return on investment calculations on the next design initiative to actually persuade why it's worth investing in and actually taking to the next step. So at Park, we're really excited to we do it on a regular basis, and we create different models. And the purpose behind some of these different models is to create different viewpoints, that you can see something from a fresh perspective. And this is where a lot of innovation can happen, is keep reinventing these. This particular model here we tried out on Tuesday is something called the Design Value Canvas, where we isolate out all the puzzle pieces behind what you need to do an ROI calculation on your next design activity. On the left here, you can see some of the design actions, the benefits, and of course the metrics that you would apply to design. And ultimately, you want that to change into financial results. Sometimes it's not always possible to put it into financial results. You might do it in the form of time efficiencies, especially for those larger organizations which have internal design capabilities and competencies. And on the right here is you take all of those puzzle pieces and you can actually then isolate out what is design doing, how is it actually doing it, what are you going to be measured by at the start, during, and afterwards of a project. Now, for me as a designer, being measured is a bit of a painful topic. I'm a creative, and sometimes that's not well received by design functions. But if you want to mature design within your organization, you're going to have to get used to doing that, because the whole point of design connecting to business and business connecting to design is We need to learn to talk this language from a creative point of view, and business needs to understand our language of why design is going to add value. So tools like this can really help. So where we've applied this tool, I've got 3 case studies. I'll keep them at a high level in the interest of time, of course, but let me take myself back to this humble beginning. When I started in Lego in 1998-99, there was around about 22 designers and about 3 or 4 design managers. But maturity of Lego there was in process level, you could say, a level 2. Today, they have 750 designers and around about 40 to 50 different managers or leaders of design. More interestingly enough, back then, in the 1990s, they had about 3 or 4 disciplines of design. Today, they have around about 25, 26 different disciplines of design running to deliver their part. Now, historically, on this side, I've lost control to the control tower. There we go. Thank you. Historically, Lego has been on a very successful journey the last 15 years, but it wasn't always the case. In 2005, there were negative 49% sales in Q1, Q2, and almost Q3 of that year. They were in a state of turmoil, and they had to turn the company around. They were about to be sold off to their competitor, Hasbro, who also I worked for later on. The irony was the family-owned company, which was very non-hierarchical and quite a flat structure to work in, the owner took another go at it and actually brought in a new CEO in the form of Jørn Wied Knudstrup. He was really inspirational in turning the company around. He had something called shared vision from a business mindset. He created 3 phases: manage for cash, manage for profit, manage for growth. And it would happen over between a 10 to a 15-year period. So that's interesting from a life cycle point of view and an investment point of view. Because when I went to Hasbro later on, the other leading toy company in the world, their mindset of life cycles were between 2 and 3 years. I was working in a company here that had a 15-year mindset when they wanted to make change. So the design value canvas that you saw earlier was used to initiate a number of activities that required investment in design that had to obviously pay back and deliver an ROI over time. And some of these are listed here and on the coming slides that come in front of me on that side. First and foremost, there was an initiative called Design for Business. This was about streamlining and operationalizing design ops. This is back in 2007, where we created 3 different business units where design was really the core of what was being offered up. First, you'd have the core business, which was efficient and effective and really churning everything out as fast as it could, which is great. Second, there was also this integrating of a new innovation area, the idea of concept labs and innovation hubs around the globe. And then the third was this a new business unit as well that would bring along innovation. Each had very clear objectives to deliver certain revenue at certain points. I'll give you an example. I was heading up the concept lab along with 40 people. My brief, obviously Lego, never seen before from Lego, and please don't cannibalize the portfolio, and will you deliver 2 billion Danish kroner every 2 years? And then the CEO walked out the room. And then we had to, of course, do it. And design played an integral role in that. I've kind of jumped my slide. Another initiative, for example, in the world of design and innovation and adding some of the value to this was to invest a lot more in insight research, consumer insight research. In particular, in this case, it was all about, in 2007 to 2012, the management team had fallen foul to actually being out of touch with their customers, their consumers, and actually how kids and parents actually played. So they invested and decided, from a design perspective, along with a partnership of marketing and also consumer insights, to do a lot more anthropology or ethnographic research. Now, for anybody who's done any of that, and I've done a lot of it now over the last 10 years, it's quite expensive, it's really time-consuming, and really does need an ROI calculation on it. Good news, when you're spending maybe per project, or let's say per brand, between 100 and 150,000 euros to do such research in different locations like the US or Germany or Tokyo, that the insights generated from these don't just last 1 or 2 years. Typical lifespan of a good insight of any latent unmet needs that you might have found lasts 10 years. So what we were finding is, as we were doing research each year on different segments of the business, we were still using insights from 5 years ago that actually only cost us 80,000 euros. And I say only because when you break it down over 4 years, it's actually only 20,000 euros a year to have the insights to grow a business X%. So this mindset of life cycles is super important when justifying the value of design. Different industries have different life cycles, and as a design leader, you need to dial into that, typically from our perspective. Sporting goods, typically 3 years. Pharmaceutical products, medication, between 10 and 15 years. Toy industry, 2 to 4 years, and so on and so on. Because that means when you do an ROI calculation for any initiative where you want to design to go forward, you have to base it on that thinking and that mindset. Roll on to today, I mentioned the change in design. One of the initiatives they've recently activated is looking and nurturing the new designers who are coming in and also the existing designers that are there, along with the management. And what's fascinating here is, I think 3 years ago and last 2 years, they've been on averaging bringing 50 to 60 to 70 designers per year, recruiting. That's a lot of new people, a lot of new talent, where actually they need to onboard them, mentor them, and look after them. So they've been investing in mentor programs and ultimately building that design capability. So there's useful stats and facts here. I'm a little bit behind time, but the long story here is, as you heard, to go from 1999 from, let's say, 22 designers to the 750 today, value of design is critical, and they've been doing, on a quarterly basis, the design directors are regularly doing ROI calculations on any initiative to invest in design. Another one I'll quickly slot in, and I'll bypass on the third one, Airbus. Not just actually the planes. In particular, what I mean is Airbus GSE. They're actually their global support of ground equipment. So they're the actual tools that the actual engineers use and actually make to keep all the aircraft flying safely around the globe. 5 years ago, basically, they set about creating their next 10 to 15-year design strategy for their function. And by the way, this is predominantly engineers here who design the tools. Some of these tools are essential for keeping the, of course, aircraft safe. And also, at the same time, these tools can sometimes be one-off things that only get used every 20 years. So again, mindset on life cycle really matters here. Is this a tool that is used every 6 months to maintain the aircraft? Or is this tool a tool that maybe has one-time life and needs to be repurposed afterwards, after its finished life? So they set about doing this design strategy. It was called the Design to Value strategy, and it had 10 work streams that they're initiating over the current period and over the next 15. 3 that have currently passed and been done: design for sustainability, design for standardization, and design for branding, all requiring funding, money, and are expected to deliver on the bottom line now and in the next 10 years as well. I'm going to pass, but just as a little summary maybe on this side is some of the value creation came in the form of economic value and ultimately, of course, in environmental value. And it's quite good to report on that and track that. One thing I would say with any of these case studies, that before a project started, as a project would go through, and at the end, ROI calculations were being done, metrics were being applied for design that are specific for design, that design can tangibly actually influence as well. That's quite an important part. It's not very much fun to say, can you increase the sales 20% in the next 3 years? It's not very good for designers. It certainly didn't help me as a designer, because I'd always be on, by the time it came to market, I'll be already three years into the next 3 projects. There's case studies on Halion. This is FMCG, because I'm going to bypass that. I can see my time completely disappearing on the screen in a good way. If anybody wants to ask about the fast market consumer goods world, I know some of the brands exist here: Sensodyne toothpaste, ibuprofen, all of that world. I can talk to this. But the bit that I really would like to go to is the consequences for us as design leaders or those becoming a design leader. And that ultimately goes to here. I love this statistic. 80% of designers think they're good at selling design in terms that CEOs understand. Only 10% of CEOs actually agree. So, what does that mean for us? As a manager becoming a leader of design, we need to become high-impact leaders, have a voice and ability to articulate this financial aspect and business aspect behind design, amongst all the other things that we work with. In the last 4 years, we've created a new tool which has been co-created with all of our clients as well, and it's called the High Impact Design Leadership Triangle. And we're focusing on these 3 dimensions to build this capability and understanding. Emotional intelligence behind your leadership, your business intelligence behind leadership, and ultimately your creative intelligence. No doubt the creative intelligence for most of us in here is our strength. Yay! Creative intelligence. And emotional intelligence depends on the industry and the discipline of design you're in. Business intelligence, that's where the innovation needs to happen for many of the design leaders out there, or an aspiring design leader. And you can build different archetypes and different story blocks behind those, and this is an example here. You can look at the steward, the catalyst, the architect, where you look at those interconnections between those 3 dimensions that we're playing with to create that outcome. So in the interest of time, because I know that I have run out, would be if you were to walk out of here aspiring to be a future design leader, or you already are a design leader, take these 3 dimensions, build your capabilities and competence in these areas, and learn to connect them so you can talk the language of business and actually track and progress all the success and value that you create in your organization. On that note, I think I'm well out of time. I do apologize. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, James. We do have a couple of questions. I think we can do at least one. So, how come in 2026 we are still trying to articulate and prove the value of design? And why is it a bigger struggle for designers compared to developers, for example?
Well, if I go straight to the designers, we work a lot with universities around the globe. I've had the fun job of actually recruiting future design talent for many organizations as well. And if you look at the academic support system that's there when they do their degrees or go through college, they don't usually bring this aspect up of business intelligence up and working with numbers. Fortunately for me, I love numbers even though I'm a creative. A lot of other creatives don't like numbers. It's their Achilles heel. So I would say some academic systems just simply don't support it at this point in time, and there's room for improvement there. Coming to the organizational side, I would say depends on the industry a little bit. So the maturity states of an organization, let's say in the sports industry versus FMCG versus toy industry and automotive vary greatly. So it's not a blanket sweet comment. As I say, Lego 25 years ago actually had a high maturity of design, and they've continued to really lift that in the form of design excellence. Whereas other organizations who are still well established, that maturity level's low and therefore difficult to communicate. So yeah, it's one of those things we just have to master and have the tools to do it.
Yeah, don't be scared of numbers.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You can answer other questions in Slido directly, and people can find you around the venues in the break time. So
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James.